This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our March Board of Selectmen meeting here at Memorial Town Hall. I'm Michael Frieda, North Haven's first selectman, joined tonight by Mr. Bill Piper, our second selectman, and Ms. Sally Boemi, our third select woman. So thank you for joining us. And I'd like to welcome all of our Girl Scouts here this evening. Welcome, girls. It's great to have you here. And we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you like to stand and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight? Very good. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, girls. Thank you very much. Item number 2, is there any public comment to tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move to item number 3. And ladies and gentlemen, it's always a delight here in North Haven to show the wonderful job that our Girl Scouts do here, not only in North Haven, but throughout our respective communities. Each and every one of these young ladies is an inspiration for the way they conduct themselves as wonderful young ambassadors to the town of North Haven and the cities and towns that they live in. So tonight I'm going to read a proclamation to proclaim Girl Scouts Day here in North Haven. So if you would allow me to do this, and then I'm going to ask Sally and Bill to join me in the front to present this proclamation to these wonderful, wonderful young ladies. Girl Scout Day, March 12th, 2018. The town of North Haven is proud to join in celebrating Girl Scout Day and the importance of girls' leadership development. Girl Scouts is recognized as a national leader in providing the best leadership development experience in the world for girls. Girl Scouts bring time-tested methods and research-backed programs that speak to the strengths of girl leadership development, backed by more than 100 years of experience and expertise. In Girl Scouts, girls develop their leadership potential through activities that enable them to discover their values, their skills, and the world around them, connecting them with others in a multicultural environment. Girl Scouting is continuing a legacy of creating gender-balanced leadership in the United States and the world in its second century of service to girls by providing girls with the tools to become leaders dedicated to making this country and making the world a better place. Girl Scouts offers hands-on, girl-led, girl-centered learning in STEM, the outdoors, and entrepreneurship, and also abundant opportunities to develop invaluable life skills, helping all girls take the lead early and often. Only Girl Scouts, ladies and gentlemen, offers girls a one-of-a-kind opportunity to become a Gold Award Girl Scout by engaging in leadership at the highest levels while addressing an issue they feel very passionately about, as we do also. The Girl Scout Gold Award, the highest honor a Girl Scout can earn, acknowledges each recipient's power and dedication to not only bettering herself, but also to making the world a better place for others. Girl Scouts was founded in 1912 by Juliet Gordon Lowe, whose life mission was to build girls of courage, confidence, and character. And through her legacy, She continues to have an extraordinary influence on the lives of millions of girls across the country. Today, believe it or not, more than 50 million American women are Girl Scout alumni, and 2.6 million girls and adult volunteers are active members of the Girl Scouts of America. So today it gives me a great honor, by virtue of the authority that's been vested in me by the citizens of North Haven and our town charter, to hereby applaud the commitment the Girl Scouts have made to support the leadership development of American girls, and proudly proclaim March 12th as Girl Scout Day here in North Haven. We, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, our town residents, and the entire town of North Haven, we acknowledge with overwhelming pride and enthusiasm the many girls and women of the town who dedicate themselves to the Girl Scout promise. And with that, ladies and gentlemen watching on TV and here in the audience tonight, all these beautiful young girls here, for what you do to make our community a better place and the world a better place, I'm going to ask Sally and Bill to join me, and we'd like to present you this proclamation. So, Sally, if you can stand here, and maybe we have all the girls come up here, okay? Bill, join me on my right. Okay. So, we proudly offer you this proclamation and heartily thank you for everything that you do. Because at a time in today's society where so many young children are taking a wrong turn and are influenced by others who are making bad decisions, I'd like to say to you what I said to the Boy Scouts, the event that I was at a couple of weeks ago. It gives us a great deal of pride knowing that there's young girls like you and young boys in the Boy Scout program that are having a positive influence on your peers. And believe it or not, there are children, boys and girls, that watch very closely their friends and watch very closely how well their friends conduct themselves and how they act in class, act with their parents, and act with their other friends and children. And each of you demonstrates that here. And I know that you're still very young, but please consider the fact that how you conduct yourself, other children will watch you. And I hope, and I've seen it clearly, how others will follow your lead and do everything that you're doing. So I'd like to offer you this proclamation. Very good.
We made a pretty good show.
It's always a very positive thing for us. Now, my friend Lee Capazzo, our officer back here who I lift weights with in the gym, we have a couple hundred more push-ups tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Daisy's in the front.
Good picture of the cookies, too. Please, everybody buy cookies.
Yes, please, cookies.
Smile.
Oh, I'm okay. Jeez, how did I miss that? Son of a gun. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy.
Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You know, it really gives, you have to admit, it's with a great deal of pride and joy that we see these young girls tonight and the young boys that I see in Cub Scouts and the events I go to, Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. I've said it before, these are the future leaders of our communities. And we look at this as something that's very important here. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for those watching on TV for your attention. We appreciate it. All right, we'll move to item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes of the Board of Selectmen's meeting, February 1st.
I'll move the approval of the February 1st minutes.
Okay.
I'll second that approval.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Jennifer. Jennifer, how are you? I'm doing fine. So I'd like to tee this up, okay? Jennifer Susskind here tonight, I've invited. Jennifer made a very compelling presentation to one of our mayors and first selectmen meetings last year regarding fracking waste, and coming up perhaps with an ordinance to protect our respective communities through the prohibition of having fracking waste transported through our communities. So I was really struck by this presentation. I've spoken with Nancy Alderman a couple of times, you know, Nancy here in North Haven, who asked me if we were going to move forward with this, and she thinks very highly of you also, Jennifer, and she said that she was very happy that you were coming. I invited you tonight.
Thank you.
So what I'd like you to do is not only present to us as the Board of Selectmen, but our audience here and those watching on North Haven TV, kind of the same presentation you gave us at the mayor's meeting.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me tonight. Thank you very much. And as a lifetime Girl Scout, I say thank you very much as well. There's a lot of talk about fracking waste, and most people don't know what this waste is. So my presentation is to give people an overview and to talk about why it's important to ban this waste here in Connecticut. This first slide shows where the waste in and is being disposed of that's coming just out of the state of Pennsylvania. The drilling activity in this state is producing so much waste that it's being shipped out to many states, as far as Idaho and Texas. And we currently have a state law that mandates regulations be written, so that will mean future permits to bring this waste to Connecticut. As you can see in the bottom corner of this slide, massive amounts of liquid waste are being produced. I have updates for 2015. It's just under 1.7 billion gallons for that year, for 2015. And there's also a lot of solid waste, hundreds of thousands of tons of solid waste that are being produced. If this waste comes to Connecticut, it would be coming via tanker truck through our highways. It could either come across routes 84 or 95. There are 3 hazardous waste treatment facilities that are privately owned, and they're for-profit facilities. And when this law was first written in 2014, all 3 of them potentially could have applied for permits once the regulations were written. But 2 of these towns have already banned fracking waste, so now the remaining town or facility that could possibly receive this is in Bridgeport. And it's not just these 3 towns that could be impacted by this waste. There possibly could be effluent that is partially treated waste that's then sent off to other wastewater treatment facilities. And this waste is also getting permitted to be mixed into other products and then reused. One, it's called a beneficial use permit or a BUD permit. And the drill cuttings are being mixed into fill used for construction projects. Brine, which is very salty, is being used as a road de-icer. Used frac sand is being mixed into concrete and turned into blocks and used for construction. And this is the problem with this waste. Where the drilling is currently occurring, the Marcellus Shale Formation is very highly radioactive. It's known to be the most radioactive shale deposit in the country. And in both vertical drilling, which is more conventional drilling, but the horizontal drilling, which moves through a much greater surface area of the shale, can pick up a lot more radioactivity. And these 3 slides that I'm showing you come from the National Council on Radiation Protection. This is a congressionally chartered agency whose mission is to warn the public about radioactive exposure. And we know that this radioactivity can travel through the air and have numerous pathways to make it inside the human body. It can also contaminate soil and surface waters, and also groundwater, which is aquifer water that supplies drinking water wells. And through contaminated soil, through dust that you inhale or possibly eat, on crops, and through crops and animals that also ingest or inhale this, it can make its way through the human body. And we do know how radioactive this waste is. This particular slide comes from the U.S. Geological Survey, which is a branch of our federal government. And all these little shapes and colors on the slide are different wells that were tested for their total radium content. It's radioactive radium that's most commonly found in this waste. And you can see where the arrow is in the graph. That's 5 picocuries per liter, which is what the EPA says is safe in your drinking water. The dotted line across the middle is 60 picocuries per liter. That's what you're allowed to release into the environment from, say, a nuclear power station, something that's regulated by the NRC. And you can see that fracking waste goes all the way up to 26,600 picocuries per liter. And unfortunately, this waste is not regulated by a federal agency because it's naturally occurring radioactive material. It's not controlled by the NRC or the FDA or any other agency that would deal with radioactive material. It's up to states to write individual laws for their own states, and Connecticut does not have these laws in place. And there's many different naturally occurring toxins that are also buried in that shale deposit, so they mix in with the waste. This is just a short list of some that are commonly found and their impacts to the human body and to our health system. And this particular slide is a graphic that explains research that was done in 2011. Several hundred chemicals were researched to find out what they do to the human body, and where you see the percentages in blue, those are the amount of the chemicals that are soluble in water, so they could very readily mix if they're spilled or run off. And volatile means that they can vaporize and travel through the air, so you can inhale these chemicals as well. Since that that previous slide, Yale has done many studies. The latest show more than 1,100 known chemicals that are being used nationwide. And through their studies, they found hundreds of them that are carcinogenic and have developmental and reproductive problems, primarily because they impact the endocrine system. And numerous other researchers around the country have done studies. Duke just came out with one that showed that thousands of spills are occurring just from moving this waste around. Unfortunately, that's how we would be impacted here in Connecticut as this waste is brought in and transferred and stored. And these are the different types of waste. In the top right left corner, you see the solid waste. These are drill cuttings. It's a very wet mixture of solid waste because it has chemicals that were used during the drilling process and also a natural brine that comes out of the ground. On the top right, you see more of this slurry material. This is flowback waste that comes right back to the surface after they inject these wells with millions of gallons of solution. And this is a mixture of sand and contaminated water and chemicals and anything that got picked up from the ground after they shatter the shale rock. And then before the gas can be put into a pipeline and sent to a customer, it has to go into a special dehydration process. And this removes this brine material from the gas. And this liquid brine actually produces much more liquid waste over the lifetime of the well than the flowback on the top right. And this is used over and over again until it becomes too contaminated and it has to be sent off for final disposal. And we know that the hazardous waste treatment facilities that are operating here in Connecticut have had difficulty complying with the regulations that they already have to fulfill for other types of hazardous waste. And you can find updated information at the Rivers Alliance website. But as you can see, they've had numerous quarters where they're in non-compliance with the rules they're supposed to be following, and significant violations are where they are discharging chemicals that they're not supposed to be. They were supposed to have been treating these chemicals, but they're discharging at levels beyond what they're allowed to by regulation. And this is the chain of contamination that could occur in Connecticut if we bring this waste in. Where you see all the asterisked wording on the left column, these are where we've already seen contamination in other states. We don't want this happening here in Connecticut. As I mentioned before, the beneficial use permits can also be a source of contamination. It would be very hard for DEEP to monitor how this waste is being handled and treated. There are handlers out of state that are choosing to use methods to measure the radioactivity that we know are inadequate ways to measure all of the radioactivity. So there's concern that things will be deemed not radioactive just by the way that they're trying to test it, but in actuality, in real time, it very well could be. And this is the difference between, I'm sorry, this slide is cut off. I'm sorry, my TV is a different size than my PowerPoint. But this is the different types of waste that this drilling process and the oil and gas industry produce on the left-hand column. The center column where you see all the X's, that is all the waste that would be prohibited with a local ordinance. And the far right column is what the current moratorium definitely prohibits and possibly prohibits. And I say possibly because some of the language is vague. The current state law temporarily prohibits hydraulic fracturing waste, which is just one process in about 6 processes that produce different types of waste. And then it also bans anything generated secondarily to the purpose of hydraulic fracturing, and that wording gets a little sketchy. So out of Connecticut, there has been quite a big movement to both ban fracking and to ban the waste. When New York State was being threatened to start this high-volume horizontal drilling process, a lot of individual towns started passing their own bans and moratorium, and then there was activity to move this, and this caught Governor Cuomo's attention, and they did extensive studies and an extensive health impact assessment, and they determined that this high-volume horizontal fracturing would not be of benefit to New York State. So they banned it. But through that whole process, many local citizens and legislators learned about the hazards in this waste. So 15 counties in New York State have specifically banned the waste, and that's what you see with the lighter red overlay. New York City has also banned this in all 5 boroughs, and other of the individual towns. Their fracking bans also include waste bans. Some of them, not all of them. And then the state of Vermont has also banned both fracking and the handling of the waste. And here in Connecticut, I've been giving these presentations around the state for 3 years, and there are now 38 towns that have local ordinances banning this waste. Washington was the first town to ban this. I wasn't part of that. It was a environmental group that spearheaded that through their town, and they use different language, but 37 additional towns have basically used the same language. And a bill was recently introduced in the Environment Committee. When it first came out of committee, it was the same language as the weaker moratorium language that doesn't cover everything. And there was a public hearing last Friday, and just last night, or yesterday, the Environment Committee passed new language out that has been strengthened, that includes the definitions that were missing from the state language, but now has, but are in the ordinances. So we were hoping that they would include that. So it has been passed out of the Environment Committee, but it has a very long road to go before we know whether it gets passed and signed by Governor Malloy into law. We've seen in three times in the past 5 years where a ban did not make it through. And we've also seen efforts to weaken the language twice when the ban did make it through a good part of the legislative session. So we don't know what's going to happen this year. And we're hoping that our Senate and our House will pass this as it's currently coming out of the Environment Committee. We're hoping that it doesn't get weakened with amendments. I did hear a conversation recently between a DEEP employee and an oil and gas lobbyist, and it appears that DEEP wants to introduce language that would weaken the ban and allow the byproducts to possibly be used here in Connecticut. So if that does happen to the state language, an ordinance that you pass here in town could say that regardless if DEEP approves this beneficial use, we won't allow that in our town.
Is there an actual bill number yet?
Yes, it's Senate Bill 103. And in order to find the new language, you have to go to the Environment Committee page and look at the LCO number. Because if you go to the bill page, Senate Bill 103, they haven't yet posted this new LCO language. What happened was the Environment Committee voted 29-1 to pass this better language out of committee. It goes to this LCO office, and then they actually write it up officially. And then once they do that, it gets posted on the website.
Okay. Jennifer, you have a draft ordinance for us to look at, have our attorneys look at?
I do have that. I had thought that you already had it from the COG meeting, but I can re-forward it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Bill and Sally, any questions?
And this includes, the ones that have already been passed, like in New York, that includes transportation bans?
You cannot ban transportation because it would violate federal interstate commerce laws. So this actual language that we're using has already been passed in several counties in New York State. We actually, when I was working with the first town, which was the second to pass, they recognized that what Washington had wasn't fully comprehensive, and they were trying to come up with their own language. And I suggested to them that we just take the language that was passed in New York, edit out reference to New York statute, make sure it's copacetic to our needs in Connecticut, and then that's what's been passing since. So it bans the storage, transfer, application. The application is an important word because you can't ban the transport. What you can make illegal is if a truck is traveling through your town and it happens to be leaking while it's traveling through, then that application as it leaks would be illegal. I have family that lives in Pennsylvania, and we see evidence of trucks leaking on the roadways. And it would also ban any transfer location in your town, any storage in your town. So for example, if there was a property owner who was in an industrial area and he wanted to apply to DEEP to have a tank farm to either hold untreated waste or treated waste, your ordinance would not allow that. And this would save the town the tanker truck trips that are going back and forth to constantly deliver to this transfer location, and it would also prevent any type of spillage that occurs, because there is significant spillage at both transfer and storage sites, as we've seen in other states. Near my family's house in Pennsylvania, over 60,000 gallons were spilled just by transferring it from one tank to another. And unfortunately, that left the site and went into other people's properties and went into waterways. And when this waste reaches a waterway, it basically kills everything. Everything kind of floats to the surface and then floats downstream. It's highly toxic material.
So the disposal plant in Bridgeport will do what with the waste?
Well, try to treat it, but what we've seen in other states is that, and they might have to bring in additional equipment that they don't currently have, so they would build this out. In 2014, when we were first trying to get the ban, some legislators were talking about how that would be a good thing to develop jobs in Connecticut without looking at the long-range impacts of the contamination. So it's possible they would have to expand their facility if they want to apply for treating it. And they'd have to use several different methods to treat it. What we've seen in Pennsylvania and in other states, that it's not being adequately treated. And then what gets discharged has turned a creek, rivers, a lake. They're now scientifically proven by Duke University scientists that have gone out and taken samples, and the sediment in these waterways is now radioactive, to the point where it could go to a radioactive waste facility if they ever get around to dredging the sediment like we've done in the Housatonic River here in Connecticut. The problem is radium is water soluble under certain conditions, so it's not as easy to just scrape out of a river the way PCBs can be. PCBs are relatively stable once they get in the soil. So, the treatment, and then the concern, if you look up on this map, you'll see the dark green diamonds are the treatment facility towns, and the lighter diamonds are facilities that are publicly owned treatment works, POTWs, and these facilities with the light green diamonds are licensed to accept non-domestic transported waste. So our concern would be that the hazardous waste treatment facilities would treat it first, but they might have too much liquid to be able to put into the sewage system of the town where they're in. So depending on future deep regulations, these additional facilities could potentially be permitted to take the treated effluent. But if it's not treated properly, or if it's not tested properly for radioactivity, that's where you run into this risk of contamination. Really, the only way to adequately test for radioactivity is to take a sample, put it in a closed container in a laboratory for 15 to 30 days, and then test it using a technique called gamma spectroscopy. And that will tell you, without a doubt, how much radioactivity is in this waste. But the idea that these waste haulers will have to park a tanker truck for 30 days waiting for this treatment, this testing to take place before it's allowed to come in, probably won't happen. Currently, DEEP and other states do representative sampling of wastes. There's also concern that wastes, as the amount of liquid flows out of the well, the very first day it comes to the surface, it has a much lower radioactivity content. But over time, over the course of days and a few weeks, that level can double at least. And so there's concern that it might be tested at one point and be found not to be radioactive, but later on what's coming out, and then that well is deemed okay, and then later on what's coming out of it could be highly radioactive. So there's all sorts of ways for, unfortunately, contamination to slip through the cracks, and that's how other states have become contaminated, because they've had regulations in place, and quite frankly, rules on paper don't necessarily help when there's accidents or spills or leaks, because if it's employee error or equipment error, you can't control that with rules on paper. And when you're talking about billions of gallons of liquid that's highly hazardous, just statistically speaking, you're going to have problems with accidents and spills.
Okay. Sally,
Yeah, the Hampden Town Council recently passed an ordinance.
They did.
Very recently, I think.
Yep.
Are you familiar with their ordinance? Is
I
it
am.
something that you
I am familiar with that.
would
Yeah.
approve of, or did it follow your general format of approved
I've-
ordinance?
I was working with a group of residents in Hampden, and they helped to move that forward. I never had an opportunity to speak to the town council. So unfortunately, during their town council meeting, they were getting information that wasn't quite accurate. But their ordinance is exactly what I would recommend that North Haven pass.
Okay.
Okay.
And I noticed in your list of chemicals, benzene and barium were there. Those are carcinogens for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, Yale has identified at least 100 carcinogens they were mostly looking at carcinogens that cause short-acting cancers, leukemia and lymphomas, because they were focused on how children could be impacted in their lifetime in a short amount of time with their research. So the number of carcinogens that they've identified only impacts those types of cancers, but there are other carcinogens that have that impact cancers that take much longer to develop.
And do you see any significant distinction between the solid fracking waste versus the liquid, or they're both equally?
Well, the solid waste, if you're drilling through that well bore, the first depths might not be impacting a highly contaminated area. But again, there's no way for people to really know how it's being handled out of state. Is the good waste being properly separated from the bad waste, or is drilling happening to move the well along as fast as possible? And are things being mingled together at centralized waste treatment facilities? It's very hard for somebody who's going to accept a product to know how it's been handled out of state. In Pennsylvania, they do require certain testing, but again, they can choose a number of ways to test for radioactivity, and the total number of toxins that are tested for, I think, is maybe under 20, and a single fracking job can combine 100 chemicals, and then if you're mingling waste from many different sites together, you don't know how many different chemicals are being combined. So this is why we recommend a complete ban, because you won't be caught with contamination that's coming in under the radar.
More of a general question, how long has this fracking technique of extracting oil and natural gas from shale been used?
Well, if you look up at this slide, the vertical well on the left-hand side, that's conventional drilling, and they can inject these wells with liquid hydro solution as well, a water and chemical solution. So they have been technically fracking for a very long time, for decades. But this new method of being able to turn the well bore after you've gone down vertically and then continue on for thousands of feet horizontally, that's called high volume horizontal fracturing. And it first was approved by the federal government in 2005. It became exempt from the Safe Water Drinking Act by this federal energy policy that passed. And then it really started ramping up commercially 2007, 2008 in Pennsylvania, and it was going gangbusters for many years. And then it has slowed down within the past couple years because the price of gas got so low because the market was being glutted that it wasn't profitable for drillers to produce gas. And then when the price of oil dropped significantly, people weren't converting from oil burners to gas burners. So there wasn't an increased demand. So if you look at the amount of waste that has been produced in, say, in Pennsylvania, if you can find the figures, I'm not sure who's actually tallied it. Pennsylvania DEP does have the records, but it's very onerous to go through their records and tally and get the figures together. So probably 2015, 2016 probably had a smaller amount of waste.
Right, I wasn't really familiar with the fracturing or fracking technique till about 6 months ago. That's
right.
Why I asked. I find it interesting in that other chart, most of the towns that have already passed the ordinances banning seem to be in the northeast corner.
On the map?
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened in the northeast corner is there's a religious eco-justice group, interreligious eco-justice network And they've been holding a climate summit for the past 4 years. And people who attended one of their first summits decided that they really wanted to get moving in their area of Connecticut, and they formed a group called Eastern Connecticut Green Action. And they have about 100 members scattered throughout towns, and these members helped champion and move the ordinances through the towns that they live in. I helped out in Coventry, the first one in that area. And then other than coming and giving a presentation and maybe sending a few emails, the rest of it was completely generated by people who lived in their towns. And then on the days that it was going to pass, sometimes I would come to be able to answer questions so that people had accurate information at public hearings. So it's because of Eastern Connecticut Green Action that you see so much activity up there.
I just have one final question. Assuming we proceed and consider an ordinance here in North Haven, I mean, how effective is a local ordinance if there are still if the state loopholes
Right.
continue? Should we be focusing more on suggesting that our state representatives focus on this issue, or is doing something locally going to be enough if we do make this effort?
Well, at this point, I'm recommending towns to move forward independently and at the same time encourage action at the state level. Because, quite honestly, there's a lot of horse trading that happens with bills at the state capitol. And by the time you get to the last couple days of the session, you literally have legislators saying, I'm not going to vote for your bill if you won't vote for mine. So we don't know what's going to happen to this bill. And if DEEP wants to have permits for beneficial use products, basically it's Davy against Goliath trying to convince legislators that this is potentially contaminated material, and it's not a good idea.
Is it classified as hazardous waste
Only
officially?
only in Connecticut, because of the law that passed in 2014.
Okay.
When DEEP writes regulations, this would have to be hazardous waste.
Okay.
The problem is this exceeds hazardous waste because of the radioactivity that we don't have rules for yet. Supposedly they'll be part of our regulations. But we're the only state that has passed this. The oil and gas industry has been able to exempt themselves out of key wording or sections of virtually every environmental law that's passed at the federal level since the 1970s. And in 2005, the exemption from the Safe Drinking Water Act was kind of the nail in the coffin, which allowed the oil and gas industry to inject all these chemicals in the ground. No other industry is allowed to do this unless they're disposing of waste in special waste wells.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Yeah.
here's what I would like to suggest, that Jennifer's going to send me the ordinance. We'll look at it, we'll send it out for the next Board of Selectmen meeting. We'll address it at the next Board of Selectmen meeting. I'll ask for a motion to take it to a town meeting. And then if we decide to do that, I'm going to invite you back, Jennifer, to address the
Happy to.
town meeting, do the same presentation.
Yeah.
As you know, in this form of government, the ordinance would have to be adopted by the town meeting.
Right.
So I think this is a good first step. Once we get the ordinance that you're going to send me again, we'll send it out to Sally and Bill.
And thank you for all your time tonight. I appreciate it. And if you have an interest, you can also pass a resolution on your own that encourages state leaders to adopt Senate Bill 103 without changes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all your time.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, what I'd like to do, you see on the agenda, it shows a First Selectman's overview, but while Val is converting the technology, I'd like to give Sally the floor to address item number 7.
Yes, thank you. I put this on the agenda because a citizen actually came to my office, retired officer, North Haven police officer Steve Smith came to my office. I'm sure you know of him. He served on the North Haven Police Department for decades. I've known him since I was a kid. And he came to me because he walks a couple of miles every day in that neighborhood of Manor Drive, and I guess Manor Drive was paved in sometime in November. And he came to me asking that I speak to you, and because he counted 45 curb-to-curb cracks in the road that he says were there within 4 weeks of the paving, well before any, we had that cold spell right after Christmas. And so he asked me to bring it up to you. I thought about going to Mr. Palma or to the Public Works Director, but a few years ago, you sort of realigned the administration of Public Works and said that you were going to be in control day-to-day of streets and roads. So for that reason, and because Officer Smith asked me to, I just wanted to bring it to your attention to see if you could send someone out there to look at it, or have someone from the contractor look at the road, because 45 cracks sounds like an awful lot for a brand-new road.
All right, so thank you. And Steve, if you're watching, thank you for your service to the North Haven Police Department all those years. We appreciate that.
Right.
So when you asked to have this put on the agenda, Sally, I sent Victor and Jonathan out there, and I have Jonathan here tonight, who went out there, surveyed the scene. For those watching
Great.
on TV, Jonathan is a municipal engineer. He has 45 years of engineering experience, and he's been our engineer since 2008. Jonathan?
Good evening. Basically, what he is seeing is what we call reflective cracks, and what they are cracks that occur due to the existing cracks in the pavement underneath. So when we pave right over the cracks. What happens is we are well aware of these cracks going to occur. What we do is we wait time and let the cracks open up, and sometimes it takes a couple of years for that to happen. And then we'll go back and we will crack seal all the cracks. Now, what happens is the other alternative would be to go in and grind up the entire road. So you would have basically all the asphalt ground up. You would then put it back down, regrade it with graders and so forth, and then we'd have to put in at least 2 layers of asphalt. And so the cost difference on something like that is like 1.5 to 10. That's how much difference it would be. So it's much more cost-effective to do it the way we're doing it, and let the cracks occur, because we know they're going to occur, and then go back in at this later date and fill the cracks in. And like he said, it's literally from curb to curb. And if you saw the road before we paved, those are exactly where the existing cracks were. So it's not the ideal situation, but it's the most cost-effective way to do it.
Did you think that it, oh, sorry.
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, like Mike said, I've been in this business 45 years, and I'm an old dog. So what I did was I checked with some other towns to see if there was any new tricks, and they all agreed with me that that's the same way they do it. It's like they said to me, it's really the most cost-effective way to take care of that.
Yeah, I went out and walked the entire street as well, and every 15 to 20 paces, there was a curb-to-curb crack.
Right.
And then I went to Tennyson, which is in my neighborhood, and that was done about a year earlier, and I think that they're comparable in length. And I only counted 4 cracks, but now I understand their cracks are following cracks, but.
I can,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
No.
Basically, if you look at Manor Drive, when you were walking that street, did you notice all the houses pumping water out onto the street? All the gutters were running with water? There was, just the other day when I went there, there had to be at least a half a dozen or more. In Manor Drive, it's extremely high water table. As a matter of fact, we actually, before we paved Manor Court, we had to go in and put in additional drainage because of the high water table in there. So that's basically adding to the facts that we have the more cracks.
Right, I saw all the new catch basins, but I didn't notice that. You said the cracks will come within 1 or 2 years. Do you find it unusual that so many came within a month of the paving?
I gave that some serious thought, and that's what when I went out there, that water table has a very high chance of causing those cracks.
Okay.
And now that you wait until the spring after this winter with that tight freezing we had in December, you'll see they'll open up a lot quicker than normal probably.
Okay, well, that's it. I mean, I promised Retired Officer Smith I'd bring it up, and I thank you for looking into it.
Oh, and Sally, if there's something like that, if you want quicker answers, please just call. I'm sure Mike won't
He
mind.
specifically asked me to talk to Mr. Frieda, and I can only talk to Mr. Frieda
That's-
about town affairs at a public meeting, so,
That's fine, thank you.
great, thank you. Okay.
Just out of curiosity, in terms of these reflective cracks, why don't you seal them before you pave over?
Because they'll still come through.
They'll still come through even
Yeah.
if you seal before.
Right.
The best way to do it is afterwards.
That's correct.
And how long does that usually last before?
That'll last us a good 10 years.
Which is about the useful life of the road then.
Yeah, we like to try to get 20 years out of it,
Yeah.
but
10 is based
10
on
is
how
where
bad the
we're,
road-
for some reason, and I've seen this with other towns, they're questioning the overall value, not the value, but the, how well the asphalt's being made nowadays. It's, doesn't seem to be holding up quite as long. We're getting 10 or 15 years when we used to get maybe 20 or 15, or 20 or 25. So,
All right, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sally. Thank you, Steve.
Okay,
All right. I want to spend about 5 to 10 minutes just giving you a quick overview regarding, we'll start with from an operational standpoint. And we were very fortunate, earlier last year, as part of our town open space initiative, as you may remember, I recommissioned the Open Space Commission, and they have done a great job in analyzing the top 10 properties that we should consider for open space. We bonded in last year's budget, we had authorized $1 million for open space, and this particular property here at 182 Kings Highway was the subject of a proposed development years ago, and residents on Kings Highway and Hartford Turnpike really objected to it for drainage issues, for land undulation issues, and it was at that time we had thought about the prospects of open space. So, to make a very long and complicated story shorter, we met with Mr. Sinaway. It was a property on the top 10 for open space. We did, according to the rules and regulations of the government, 2 Blue Book appraisals. They both came in about the same, 2 independent companies. We purchased the property for $447,500, and at the same time, we filed for a grant. And we didn't know if we were going to get the grant, but through the hard work of our state legislators, we ended up getting a grant for $200,250, which we will now reimburse the general fund for the expenditure for that went against that $447,500. And even today, I had another meeting on open space. We're looking at, the committee, Open Space Committee, coming up with some other recommendations for the Board of Selectmen and the town meeting form of government to contemplate. Please understand that open space is very important to respective communities, particularly in their R20 and R40 zones and all the residential areas. This initiative in this administration is designed to protect the integrity of the residential areas throughout the town without intrusive development. So I wanted to give you an update on that. From a financial standpoint, these are some dates that I'd like you to be aware of as we're preparing for the budget. Let me go back here, 2017-18. I wanted to let you know that I happened to read a letter to the editor today, and the letter said that Mr. Frieda is an alarmist, a Chicken Little alarmist, because I'm suggesting that the sky is falling in. And in the letter, the citizen who wrote it correctly says that the town took a $922,000 reduction to the general fund. But in the letter, the citizen also reported that we offset that because we have $1,445,000. $1.4 million, I think, was the stated number. So in effect, the surplus should be 500,000. That is incorrect. That's false information. Because we don't have that 1.4 million. And consider this. The letter went on to suggest that with the $500,000 surplus and how MRSA is designed to take out public works expenses to give to the Board of Education, that was what was stated, that what it would mean is projecting an expense in next year's fiscal budget without knowing if we're going to get to 1.4 million. So as long as this administration is here, this administration is not going to spend money moving forward that they haven't received yet. The referendum is in May. So we're not going to know by May about the $1.4 million. This is what we're told. As Tom White so eloquently said to me when I asked him the question, he's here tonight, Tom, do you think I should still give information and real-time information? Because it changes. And Tom said yes. Because Tom made an excellent point. Because it gives us as citizens a flavor for what's happening and how it's so uncertain. So if you see anything from this point forward that says we have a $500,000 surplus because of the difference between the $922,000 hit in the general fund and the 1.4 in MRSA, it's false information. It'll only be true information if we receive it. Now, an argument can be made, well, we received it in the past, Mike, and you said we weren't going to get it. But we don't have it yet. We're not going to spend something we don't have. So I wanted to illustrate that for this year's budget. We fully anticipate balancing this fiscal year's budget. Our goal is to try to deliver a surplus to carry forward into next fiscal year to offset what now is about $4.2 million in requests. And we also have another situation that we'll talk about during the public hearings when we look at this budget that we're a little bit concerned with. Keep this in mind. I gave a State of the Union address to the business community. They walked out of there all excited. They're all pumped up. They like the message. But that revenue is not coming in for another 2 years, 2 fiscal years from now, all of that new business that's going to be coming in. Now, when we look at this coming budget that we're preparing for, I'd ask you to pay attention to this Saturday. I met with the teachers union. They asked to see me yesterday. They're asking for over $2 million more in the Board of Education. And I spent an hour and a half with the teachers union, so they're going to be coming to the meetings, presenting their case. And this Saturday, Dr. Cronin and the Board of Education are going to be here presenting to the Board of Finance the proposed budget for fiscal year 2019. Now, here's some dates that I think would be very important for you to consider. We'll be finalizing at the budget workshop schedule for March 21st, which is a Board of Finance meeting. At that point, we will come up with a tentative budget, an idea of what we're going to present to the public. And the first budget hearing meeting is Tuesday, April 3rd. That'll be at 7 p.m. at the North Haven High School. And then we will have another Board of Finance meeting in April, and then that would possibly refine the budget after what we hear on April 3rd, have another annual budget town meeting on Monday, May 7th, and then the referendum will be, it's not on here, but it will be the following Tuesday after that, the 15th is the referendum. So those are key dates, ladies and gentlemen, and we really encourage you to come out to the meetings, offer your input. That's very, very helpful and beneficial to us. Now, a quick snapshot. I can talk about this for 2 hours, to be perfectly candid. A quick snapshot, Amazon update. They broke ground last month. I'm very happy to report $1.4 million came in fire fees and building permit fees. Despite the fact that we were told at public meetings, it's not going to be coming in, it came in. And keep in mind that we were confident it was coming in because yours truly is directly involved with these projects. I'm not dealing with an intermediary. I'm directly involved with each and every project going on in the town. So that's the update there. And I wanted to also mention that very soon, perhaps in the next 4 to 6 weeks, there'll be an official groundbreaking ceremony there. And Amazon is going to be telling me when they would like to do that. They now have assigned 2 corporate contacts to me, 2 corporate liaisons between myself and Amazon corporate. And that's a good thing, and we're trying to get at least one of them, Valerie and I, to address our April economic development meeting. I want to give everyone an update on Leon's. They're not going to be reopening. I got the word yesterday. So we are working very hard with the property owner and the commercial real estate group to get another restaurant there. There are things that have gone on there that I can't share right now, but the bottom line for our residents who've asked, they are not going to be reopening. Trader Joe's. I want to comment on this because you've heard me say, and most recently on TV at our Chamber of Commerce State of the Union, that we're not going to be getting a Trader Joe's. That's what we've been told. We've been told, not only North Haven, but 161 other cities and towns that Trader Joe's is not expanding. However, we recently saw that there's an online survey that Trader Joe's has put out. And the other night on Facebook, I was communicating with some of the residents, asking them to fill that out and request that you'd like to see a Trader Joe's here. Because we're working at the top in terms of the top relationships there, who have kind of resisted expanding. So any help the residents can give in filling out the survey, we have a couple of locations we think they'd go very well. And this is now back on my radar screen to see if we could undo what's been told to us in the past. And keep this in mind, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a retailer like this that sees all the public support, and with someone like myself now championing this to see if we can bring this back for consideration, the residents can help us if they would like to see this retailer here. And Toys R Us would be a location where potentially they could go. Toys R Us went bankrupt on a national basis. Right now, they are in the process of restructuring. Right now, they're trying to renegotiate their lease in the plaza there to see if there's a way they can get a lesser amount per month to stay open. That's between the plaza owner and Toys R Us. I'm not sure what the outcome's going to be on that. But that's a possible location potentially for Trader Joe's if they are interested. So I want to repeat that I have publicly said they're not coming, but once we saw the online survey, we decided to try to move forward and see what we can do. 33 Stiles Lane, you might not hear much about this. I mentioned it once or twice. This is big, ladies and gentlemen. This is a company in Connecticut that's now expanding into North Haven. This is 138,000 feet of warehouse space that'll be occupied with 100 new jobs here in town. It's a warehouse distribution facility. And that building's going to be renovated. I met with the new owner who were thinking of buying it. They're actually located in Massachusetts. We brought them in, hit it off with them right away. They operate in cities and towns where my offices were in my corporate business career, and they decided to buy it, and we worked with the company to bring them in. You're going to see some really significant activity there. Stop and Shop Plaza, 2 updates. 11,000 square feet will be populated where the old Hibachi Grill was with this buffet, this Asian restaurant that you see here. And Bagelicious is moving forward. This was a byproduct of many discussions that we had with Stop and Shop's commercial real estate development company, and they took our advice. They made Taco Bell and KFC an offer to buy out the lease, and that happened. And this is a company or a business that currently is in Cheshire that's opening up a new store, a larger store with a takeout window that'll be in effect. So that's what's happening at the Taco Bell KFC. The North Haven train station, a lot of meetings with the DOT even today. This afternoon, before this meeting, we had all of the head people from the DOT in my office, and we introduced them to Pfizer, because Pfizer has the property at the end of Stiles. The DOT is so committed to North Haven to put a train station there, but with the state transportation fund in the condition that it's in, right now there's no construction money. But they, much to my delight, have continued to call the meetings with us here in North Haven to give us updates, and they want to move forward with this. This site will either end up, if the money's there, on Divine Street, or now Stiles is another option. Depending upon what we can work out with Pfizer, because that gate crossing from Stiles going over into the Pfizer facility could be problematic. So we're still in the ballgame on the North Haven train station. On a noteworthy standpoint, we'd like to congratulate our library, Pat Laturza and Sue Griffiths. They are the winners of the Connecticut Library Association's Publicity Award for Electronic Media, the top website. They were recognized for that, and that award will be presented to them in the town of North Haven at their annual conference on April 23rd. So congratulations to
And
Pat.
Sue designed it, that
And-
website.
And Sue designed it. Thank you. Okay.
I just have one comment
Yes.
on the MRSA. We were discussing MRSA at the, there was discussion, I should say, at the last Board of Finance meeting about MRSA and whether to include it as a revenue line item for the 18-19 budget. And you had said, well, maybe we should wait and see if we get it this year. I mean, the most real-time prediction is that we will, but you're absolutely right, we haven't gotten it yet, but we never get it until about June. So my question is, at that meeting, I had asked if, or I had stated that I thought MRSA should be, the MRSA 1.4 million should be included in the 18-19 budget, and I thought Mr. Swinkowski agreed with that.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because we're certainly not going to know, as you said in your overview, we're not going to know if we're going to receive MRSA for this fiscal year until probably June. So that will be, too late, I guess. What is your feel about whether the 1.4 MRSA revenue line item will appear in the 18-19 budget?
We can only speculate, and I say we because I'm having this discussion with chief elected officials all over the state of Connecticut and with Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, who represents 168 out of 169 cities and towns throughout the state, of which now I've been named vice president of. So I'm plugged in with what's going on. And to answer your question, Sally, my personal opinion is if we get the MRSA funding in June, then we may want to consider treating it as an actual budgeted revenue item next year, even though it's after the fact. If we get it, then I think there's a more favorable chance we'd get it in the following year again. If we get it this year, maybe there's a chance we would get it next year. But if we don't get it this year, my opinion is we're not going to get it next year.
Right, but we're not going to know if we're going to get it. But, the CC, the Connecticut Conference Municipality, produced predictions of state aid, and they had it in both this fiscal year and included it because of Governor Malay's initial proposal for next year. I mean, that's a real-time projection. My question is, since we're not going to receive it before we do the budget, and we never receive it until June, how will we have it in the budget in March that we're going to be the tentative budget? Do you know if it'll be in there?
I don't see how we can put it in.
Okay.
I
Because
really
when I
don't.
asked Mr. Swinkowski, he seemed to be leaning toward including it.
Well, I asked him after that meeting
Okay.
the following morning, and what he was trying to communicate was that if we receive the money before the referendum, then we would budget it in the budget for next fiscal year. But he's very concerned, as I am, if we don't receive this, I'm very reluctant to budget 1.4 million in revenue next year when we have no knowledge of whether we're going to get it this year.
Right. Well, we did not budget it for
Right,
this year.
right.
The question is, based on the fact that we might get it this year, and based on the governor saying we will get it next year, the question is, do we include it?
Do we
So
include
it's
it?
a tough one.
I
It's
think
tough.
right now it's kind of rhetorical, but we're going to have to figure this out between now and that referendum date.
Right.
Okay.
Well, even before the referendum date, because you got to
Yeah.
have the budget
Right.
presented at the town meeting by charter on the 7th. So, okay, thank you.
All right, item number 8, Bill or Sally, would you like to take that?
I'll move that we approve the property tax refunds listed in the agenda.
All right.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item number 9, Bill, would you like to take that one?
Of course. Item number 9 is a bond release for property, I guess, or number P12-10 at the Crossroads Medical Office, 158 State Street, to amend the bond release voted on by the Board of Selectmen on February 1, 2018, from $300,000 to include the entire bond balance in the amount of $380,000, with the recommendation of the town engineer.
I'll move that we amend the release of the full bond of 380.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item number 10, our next meeting here is Thursday, April 5th at 7 p.m. And now we're at the point, ladies and gentlemen, public comment. Mary White.
Mary White, Summer Lane. I am in support of passing an ordinance banning the storage, transfer, and application of the fracking waste. So I'm definitely in support of that, and would like to move forward on that quickly. Do we know if the brine is being used in de-icer material in Connecticut on state highways, particularly by private contractors? Does anybody know the answer to that? Because that's definitely would be a way around them being able to use that, the contaminated waste. Okay.
Would you like us, Mary, to provide you with Jennifer's number if you'd like to call her, get more
Oh, okay.
information? Val, we have the card. We can give it to Mary, okay? Maybe tomorrow, or you're going to be out tomorrow, but we will make sure we'll get it for you.
Right now.
Yep. Oh, you have it? Okay, good.
Thank you.
So we'll give you that. And you can say that Mike suggested that you call, okay?
Okay, great.
All right,
Thank
good.
you. And the last thing is, I just wanted to, again, ask the residents to support the fire chief's request for 8 firemen, paramedics. We have a fire public health and safety hazard with only 1 paramedic on per shift. There are 8 firemen on shift now. Adding the 8 would make 10 on shift, and that would include 2 firemen, paramedics. Excuse me, with $2,840,000 equaling $1 million and $1,420,000 equaling $500,000. 8 firemen equals $1 million, so that is less than $500,000. With the simultaneous calls for service, second and third calls are going unanswered by the fire department, and with AMR eventually arriving with 2 EMTs, adding these 8 firemen, paramedics, which represent a critical need, life and death, for less than $500,000 is a start to end the public health and safety hazard. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Danielle Morphy. Hello.
Danielle Morphy, 190 Clintonville Road. People probably know where I live anyway. I actually have 2 comments. The first is I'd like to ask for help on the ECS formula. As you know, we're faced with a challenging budget with the Board of Ed, driven primarily by a $1.2 million increase in the self-funded insurance line item. And I mention ECS because North Haven is only funded at 62.9%, which is about $1,196 per student. Bethel looks most like North Haven, and they are funded at 88.4%, which is about $2,700 per kid. Wallingford is actually funded at 92%, which is fantastic. They're our neighbor. But we're asking, and we have asked Senator Len Fasano and Representative Dave Yaccarino to advocate for North Haven and bring us closer in line with our peers. So just even getting to 80% would be looking at over $400,000 of additional help to help fund our schools. And our schools are our pride. I mean, everything revolves around our school system, our property taxes, everything. We hope you will join us for the sake of the North Haven taxpayers.
So if I can comment, Danielle,
Sure.
we've been working with a group of municipalities, and there's a House bill that's been raised. And the House bill, I don't know the actual number, but the House bill is designed to equalize the percentages. And we have some municipalities who are getting well over 100% of the formula, and others are getting zeroed out. So the House bill, from what I understand, suggests that 82% should be a minimum. And that's what that would mean is cities and towns who have less than 82 would get up to 82 at that threshold, and those that are well over 100 would come down. They still could be at 100, but it's a way to equalize the formula. So that's in this general session. And, you know, people tend to forget what I'm about to say. 6 years ago, we were at like $417 a student. So our ECS has gone up to what Danielle was saying, over 1,100. Still a ways to go. And so we're hoping to get support in that House bill.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I also support the fracking ordinance, and I thought it was interesting just to hear some of the contaminants that were in that waste, and in relation to some of the contaminants that we've already decided to put in our grounds. I hope that we can move forward and stop doing that. So I hope that that does, as Ms. Mary White said, move quickly. But I did want to talk very quickly about something. I had a question. So bear with me if you don't mind me putting this down. Sure. As you know, the town was found in violation of the Freedom of Information Act in regards to a FOIA request I submitted in May of 2017. This January, the Freedom of Information Commission in Hartford found the town had violated the act, and I attended a final decision meeting on Valentine's Day. The town did not show up to object the ruling, so it remains. And I have a couple of questions, but before I do, I just want to give some background on what happened to me, and for the people watching on NHTV tonight. I had to endure a drawn-out and ultimately unnecessary process of filing this Freedom of Information complaint. But basically, quickly, last April, residents were told on camera that a contract between the town and the synthetic field vendor was already signed. Therefore, hundreds of residents' concerns about the safety and cost of this decision would not be addressed because the town couldn't break the contract without enduring significant costs. And that's basically quoted by Gary Johns. This claim was reported in the paper, actually describing Gary Johns' comments about the signed contract. When I asked for a copy of the contract on May 18th, over a month later, I was told that the town didn't have a copy, but after several contentious and hostile emails from the middle school building committee lawyer, Jeff D'Onofrio, the contract was finally given to another resident who was also looking for it. The problem was the contract was dated and signed on May 24th. This is almost 2 months after residents were told that a contract was signed and there was nothing that we could do to remedy concerns. Fine. But this is the reason the records were requested via FOIA in the first place. It only came across as a clear and blatant attempt to mislead residents when they pushed back on a decision that came from a temporary committee, which is the middle school building committee, that has zero oversight, and now, according to Mr. D'Onofrio, has zero accountability to any elected board. This opened the floodgate to hundreds of residents, and I literally mean hundreds of residents, asking why they'd been lied to, why the town seemed unwilling to sit down and explain how a very recent decision on May 24th made how that trumped residents' concerns about their children's health and safety, and now our tax dollars, because we're running into this conundrum of how are we going to pay for this, especially in 10 years when we have to remove the toxic waste and replace it. We also have to maintain it. So my question to the Board of Selectmen is, how will the town ensure that the residents are provided with clear, honest answers moving forward? We have seen that certain committees and boards have already demonstrated an inability to act in good faith. On a side note, but sort of part of this, when I saw the FOIA documents that were handed over, it was revealed that one resident's list of 30 questions that had been asked publicly and then through email as requested went purposely unanswered. No one responded to the resident, and they were told by legal counsel that they couldn't. So I can just only imagine the amount of money that the town has spent on lawyers heading to Hartford for 2 hearings, plus the time billed to review, to not answer the slew of emails sent about this matter. And I just want to know what we will do and you will do as the board to ensure that the town will never violate the Freedom of Information Act again and act in good faith when residents request public information.
You know, I would say the first part to your question, I'd attend all the meetings. You know, the building school committee meetings were very, very sparsely attended. So in retrospect, maybe there should be greater attendance. And, you know, what we do on the FOIs, ladies and gentlemen, it's no different than any other municipality. When we get the request, we turn it over to the town attorneys. You know, and this board is not really involved with that, other than the fact to have the attorneys prepare the data, look for the documentation, and if we have it, we provide it. And then in this case, they were, in the first go-around, they were up in Hartford. But, you know, that's all I could say on it. You know, it's a standard process on FOI. We turn everything over to the attorneys, and they're experts at it.
Well, I read the commission's decision on this, and I understand your point, Danielle. When I read through the decision, the town was cited for a violation of the act for failure to disclose at least one, perhaps more emails. So I think her question is maybe not necessarily the board, but what you could do as the chief executive in the town to ensure future compliance or full compliance with the act, whether you issue some kind of statement of any board or commission, you know, being more careful in compliance, because that's how am I right?
I mean, yeah,
you probably know the decision better than I. I just read it through once, but it seemed to be there were emails that were not sent to you.
Yeah, and I think the problem stemming from the entire issue is that there was a committee, a middle school building committee, that has no oversight and was not accountable to any elected board in this town. So therefore, the people running it were able to do as they please. And, you know, yes, so maybe as CEO of the town, and, you know, maybe this is more pointed towards you since you are our town CEO, you know, what do you do when you have employees who are acting without any oversight and have gotten us now in this pickle and wasted our tax-paying dollars, but also it looks bad on the town that a Freedom of Information Act was violated. It doesn't look good.
Yeah, I think the attorneys would have a different slant on what you just said, but I'm not going to debate that. I think anytime the FOI comes in, we say it all the time, let's go back in the records, and all the department heads, whoever the FOI request comes in, provide everything we have. Now, many times, we don't have the actual information that's been requested. And FOI suggests if you don't have it, you can't provide it. So we've time and time again down through the years, even on this situation with Mr. Johns, I said, Gary, you know, poll the people on the middle school building committee and ask them to go back in their archives, see if they have any emails. So that's what we do.
Well, I guess something you could put, a suggestion, you have a middle school building committee. They don't have any oversight. Moving forward, you never have a committee like that that has no oversight, or, you know, by, you know, the Board of Ed. We were told by Mr. D'Onofrio that they could exist as their own. Furthermore, to help you with the email thing, everybody on a committee gets an email, a town email, because honestly, they don't have North Haven emails, but Board of Ed does. You do. So how do you keep it clear and clean? I mean, that's just a suggestion. Sorry.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking, because that's the only way we'll ever really know.
Right. It's the first time we ever had a problem with this, ladies and gentlemen. 8 years in office, we comply with every FOI request. And but I take under consideration what you said, and thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you, and thank you for your time.
I think it's reasonable, because the emails are covered now by FOI. So right. I think your suggestion that he take a look at it is a good one.
What I will do, you know, and we had a department head meeting today, but we'll talk to the department heads to make sure there's total compliance, which in my mind, there always has been. You know, in other words, what we have, we provide. There's a certain day requirement that we can compile the information. But there's also going to be other information, like requests for personnel, disciplinary actions, that the attorneys are going to take a hard-line approach on. There's certain things that, you know, it's going to end up to be not us to decide whether we divulge it. So there's certain things we have to be very careful, because by divulging it, we can put the town at greater risk.
I was never looking for any personal information.
I'm not saying you were.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like like I said, a suggestion would be a committee such as the middle school building committee actually be held accountable, oversight, and then have official town emails temporarily.
right.
That may help the situation.
I understand your point. I do.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
A lot of the, I mean, obviously, a lot of the people, you know, on a lot of what we do here are not town employees. So it complicates things. I think.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
I
why an
mean,
official email would help,
so-
a temporary one, because or you're just saying that
That's what she's saying.
you know,
I
not
understand
yeah.
your point. Yeah, I do. I do. We
You
did
know,
that with the
it's
Board of
kinda
Ed years
scary.
ago. We put the Board of Ed, and even Sally and Bill are on the town email now.
You yeah
Yeah, so-
yeah. Then
What-
it's yeah.
Point well taken.
Thank you for listening.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, we'll have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And thank you very much for joining us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Hey, Nikki. How are you, Nick?
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.